Hello, this is Dr. Monica Oganes. I am here to talk to you about the coronavirus and kids. These days, a lot of schools are canceling classes. Kids are going to have to stay at home for a long period of time, sometimes a couple weeks, sometimes a month. Who knows right now? We don't have a clear guidance as to how long these events are going to continue. But it is important that as parents we take measures so the time that our kids are at home is productive, so that we can do our best to provide them with a safe, secure, calm environment for them to continue their activities as normal as possible, as typical as possible. So, to that effect, the National Association of School Psychologists created some guidelines along with the Nurses Association, and I'm going to address some of the issues that are important for parents to know. First of all, it's important that we remain calm and reassuring. The way we act, they're going to copy. So if we are really worried and if we show that we are anxious and nervous, kids really pick up on that because they pick up on verbal and nonverbal cues that we show to the kids. So be careful how you're acting at home. Be careful not to be watching the news all day long, minute by minute, and really show that worry about a pandemic or what's going to happen to your family. It is okay to be concerned, yes, of course, but we have to be careful because the little ones are listening, are watching, and are cueing on our reactions of what could happen. We have to just take preventive effort and emphasize to our children that we're going to do everything we can to keep them safe, to remind them that the schools are taking precautions and that's why they're staying home. Remind them that we are here for them and be there to listen, because you never know if they're having a difficult time processing information. Already I have parents telling me that kids are worried because sometimes the pictures that they see are little monsters, so they have the pictures of the virus being like little monsters. So watch the little kids, because that may be scary for them and they may not want to go out. They may be want to be with you all the time. They may not want you to go out anywhere, or they may not want to go out themselves. So watch them, observe their behavior, because if it is different, you need to address it. You need to talk to them. So it's better to take preventive measures. You always want to make yourself available to them to talk. Try not to talk about what you see on TV and blame anybody. Sometimes when we are anxious, nervous, stressed, we tend to blame somebody. So try not to do that. Try not to blame other people. Try not to blame countries. Try not to blame and stereotype the situation. Don't blame the government and things like that on, when they're listening, especially. And if you hear them do that, do talk to them and say, these are not the values that we teach at home, because we want to keep your family's mental health optimal. So those things are not really good for the kids anyway. Regarding television, social media, you want to monitor what they're watching, because first of all, a lot of the news are too strong for the kids. So be careful with the ages that they are in. So if they're younger, you don't want them to be watching adult news anyway. Social media sometimes has a lot of news that is not really necessarily truthful. Sometimes a lot of falsehoods are, distributed. So be careful. You want to monitor what they are really looking at, and make sure that you yourself get information from reputable sources that you can really trust, that they're giving you accurate information. Avoid those chats that people pass on so much information. I have dispelled so much information in the last couple of days because they are passing information that is not really accurate. And a lot of fallacies, a lot of things that people think that are okay to pass around, but it really doesn't help anybody to not have accurate information. Be careful with your kids and talk to them about what's factual and what's not, what to look for. Be aware of sharing information that is developmentally appropriate. So you don't want to share information that is not appropriate for their age. You can discern of course, the younger kids, how you're going to talk to them. Teens may be able to have access to more information, but be careful because teens are so young, so they are susceptible to being, anxious and going to panic just as much. So be careful with them and make sure that you talk to them and engage them all the time, and that way you can monitor and secure that you're doing the right thing for them. Try to establish a new routine. It's not going to be a normal routine. The routine is not for kids to be at home, right? So now is the time to establish a new routine. So what does that mean? That maybe you plan your day, always plan your day ahead of time, the night before. It's so important at this moment that you plan your day and tell your kids what you're going to do the next day, so they are expecting what they're going to do. So plan your day and then establish a new routine. So maybe in the morning, if you're home with your kids, maybe you can establish something fun that you do together in the morning first thing, or maybe you do it at midday or so forth. But a routine is always helpful. Kids have to know what to expect. Don't surprise them, move them around, and kind of like go without having anything to do all day, because then they are going to be comfortable because they're not used to not having a routine. Kids always have routines, right? They go to school at certain times and they come home at certain times, so they are better with routines. So establish a new routine to the extent possible, of course, and encourage them to keep up with their homework. The schools have probably provided them with some homework to do, and yes, you're not the teacher, but you're going to have to monitor a little bit and make sure that they're doing it right. You may not know, depending on their age, what they're up to or what they're doing, but try your best to monitor. They don't need to work like a full day, depending on how much work they have given you and how many weeks the school has said that would cancel classes. But make sure that you are giving them enough activities to do, but don't overwhelm them, because I don't think realistically you can expect a full day of work compared to a full day of class, because at school things are not constant. They move, activities change, classes change, and the teachers are always keeping a different pace. So it's not realistic for us to expect that a child would sit there for 6 hours to just do homework. So you have to make sure to mix it, with some playtime and fun time and so forth, in order for them to successfully do their activities and their schoolwork, so they're not overwhelmed. You want to be honest about what's happening, honest to the point of their developmental age, of course, and try to be accurate. We talked about the fallacy and the falsehoods that are being distributed, so try to be as accurate as possible, but kids do need to know the truth of what's going on. You don't want to surprise them, tell them what's going on, but use the appropriate language for their age group. Children, sometimes they imagine different situations, so you want to avoid that. You don't want them to start wondering what's going on and make things in their mind, make things up or based on what they see, and create other realities that are not sure. Do not ignore their concerns, because it's okay to be concerned. And for you too, as a parent, it's okay to be concerned. Of course, we have, as human beings, we are capable of having all of the emotions, and all of the emotions include concern. However, don't let that concern consume you and be everything about your day. Be concerned, because think about it. You still have your family. You still have food on the table. You have a beautiful home. You have everything that you have. And this is going to be something that we're going to all face together. And this adversity, we will overcome together. So just try to keep real, and concern is okay, but, don't get to the level of panic, because your children are going to see that and are going to feel how you're feeling. So it's also important that in the truth that you're sharing with them, you tell them how the coronavirus is spread. They need to understand that they have to keep their social distance. This is really not the time to be touching each other and going out and touching people, because it's important that they keep the distance as recommended, 2 meters, and explain to them explicitly and explain what that distance is. Show them, because they don't know, right? Show them. You have to model exactly what it is that you're expecting them to do. So this is a time to establish those rules, new rules, and make it fun. Tell them, these are the new rules that we're going to go by, and make it fun, but make sure that you actually tell them honest and accurate information. Uh, of course, you can contact your school, or they have provided you information, but there's more information about what to do in the CDC website and the nasponline.org website as to what you can do for that. It's important also that you are aware and you know exactly what the symptoms of the COVID-19, which is the illness caused by the coronavirus, are. The symptoms, and I have seen the symptoms change depending on what source you go to, but the reality is, fever, cough, shortness of breath, those are the main symptoms. And yes, people say it's sneezing and so forth, of course, but those are not main symptoms of the coronavirus. So be aware, and then you can talk to your kids about it. Fever, cough, shortness of breath, it's important that they know the symptoms. And also, what is so important is hygiene. Right now, the most important thing is that we teach our children hygiene. Why? Because that is the only thing. Hygiene and social separation, trying to contain and mitigate, is the only way that we're going to be able to address this virus and prevent from getting ill. So hygiene starts with washing your hands. Washing your hands is the most effective way to prevent getting ill, getting sick with the virus. So teach your child how to do it. Typically, we don't necessarily teach our children. We kind of from they're younger, they just do it, and they may do for 5 seconds and that's it. It is important, very important, that you count the 20 seconds and be intentional about it. They're saying that 2 happy birthday songs is the equivalent, or come up with another song. Make it fun for them, right? So you can make it fun, and then start washing it. So show them how to lather with the soap and how to really, get everything about their hand and their fingers and so forth, and sometimes their arms, because we are teaching them, to cough here or to open doors with our arms or whatever. So sometimes we need to wash our arms too. So model it and teach them what is it that you're expecting them to do, so they know, because they may not know. So you want to learn yourself, but you want to teach that to your kids as well. You want to cover your mouth. Cover your mouth with a tissue when you're coughing. That's very, very important that you cover your mouth with a tissue. If you don't have a tissue, then sneeze or cough on your elbow. You don't want to do it on your hand. And it's so typical that we have taught kids to cover their mouth, and usually they go like this. So we have to stop them and show them. If they do cough on their mouth, hands, wash your hands right away. I teach them to do that, right? So you want to teach children what is it that the expectation is, because it's important. This is not something that they automatically would know. Repetition creates a habit. Not touching your nose, not touching your hands. How many times I want to scratch my face? Your kids are the same. They're used to touching their face, their nose, their mouth. So you have to stop them and say, no, we don't want to touch our noses right now. We don't want to pick on your nose. We don't want to touch our mouth right now, or scrub our eyes right now. So you have to stop them and replace that with something else. If they need to scratch, then you can scratch with something else. Of course, that's a necessity if you have to scratch, but make sure that you're doing it with something else. So you have to be aware and teach them what is it that you're expecting them to do. They need your guidance. They really do. Encourage them to stay healthy by exercising, eating their healthy meals, and also by sleeping regular hours. And you do the same as a parent. This is really the time to stay healthy. So a lot of vitamin C and so forth, but you want to stay healthy with a typical regular diet, good diet. As much vegetables as possible, plant-based if possible. So really be careful with your diet. So the schools have already, established practices, but a lot of the schools are going to be closing. But if the school is open, make sure that they have policies that are very strict, because unfortunately, kids can get ill by transmission. So you can transmit the illness, from the virus from one person to another, and kids can do that even though kids are resilient. So think about this, young kids are very resilient, so we don't see younger kids getting sick as much, although some of course some incidents of I know a 7-year-old that had a virus in another city. So I know that they can get it, but they're very resilient, and the mortality rate is really down to 0 for younger kids. However, they can transmit it to somebody else. They can pass it on to somebody else. So because of that, you want to discuss this with your child. So what is it that we need to do then? Because right now the issue is, and what parents are telling me that they're so concerned as to what to do, it is because the kids are staying home. Some parents have to go to work. So the typical, if grandparents live in the neighborhood, then the grandparents are usually the babysitter when the kids are ill anyway, right? That usually happens. Well, we have to be careful because depending on the age of the grandparents may be very vulnerable at a vulnerable age, because the mortality rate for older people is much higher. So you have to really be careful and think about how vulnerable your parents are, the kids' grandparents, to see if you really want to make that decision to take them, because the kids may look healthy. So we could all look healthy, yet we can be transmitted the virus. So we could pass it on to somebody else, even though we look healthy. So we may not have the symptoms, but we can transmit the virus. So be careful with the older people, with the grandparents. Also keep the toys clean and make sure you spray them and you clean them also, because if you are moving from place to place, those toys may get dirty. If the kids are touching something and then they touch the toys, because the virus stays for long hours. I've seen anywhere from 9 to 12 hours or more on the objects, on the surfaces, because this virus is transmitted by touching the surface of where the virus is sitting, or sneezing, coughing from another person as well. So be careful, clean the toys, take care of the elderly. Use technology if you want to maintain that contact with the grandparents, because a lot of families tell me too, well, we go to see grandma and grandpa every weekend, if you live in the same city and that happens. Well, technology is your ally right now. You can do FaceTime. You can have even your parents or their grandparents babysit. So imagine technology. Technology is going to be important because now you can have that contact through FaceTime, and they can be watching your kids play. They can be talking to them for a little bit so that they still don't feel isolated, because we have to take care of our grandparents or elderly as well, that they don't feel isolated, because in trying to protect them, they're alone, so they would feel isolated as well. So make sure that you establish that contact as well. I'm talking about technology and what to do at home. So imagine if both parents are going to be working from home, the kids are home, so everybody's home now. What do you do? Because now maybe you don't have enough computers or iPads or whatever for everybody to do their homework at the same time. So the first thing you want to do is talk to your partner, and by partner I mean either the father, the mother, or the other person who also is home or takes care of your children. If there is another adult, talk to that adult and kind of like break down the responsibilities and establish certain times that one can take care of the kids and the other can do some work, because if you're working from home, you need to work, right? So just establish, the times in which you will take turns taking care of the kids if they're young and you need to watch them constantly. Also teach kids, depending on their age, when they're a little bit older, they can engage in independent play if you leave them doing some activity, which we'll talk about in a minute. But do establish that communication as to what time, who's going to work at what time, and who's going to take care of the kids. Because the more communication there is, the better we are at establishing, typical expectations, and we relieve our stress that way. We want to communicate to avoid stressful situations because of expectations that are not met, right? So communicate and be kind. Be kind in your communication. This is really the time to be kind. If kindness is not the typical way you communicate. Please, this is the time to be kind. You have to be kind with your partner, with somebody else who's helping you. Be kind when you communicate. It's very, very important. So when you establish, what you're going to do and you prepare your day for the next day, what do you do? Because it's not all about homework. What activities? My goodness, because nowadays we're used to only electronics, right? And we don't want to have a child that is 6 hours in electronics if they don't have anything else to do. So you, first of all, with electronics, you may be a little bit more flexible and allow more screen time during these days that they're going to be home. But by doing that, we don't mean that the screen is going to be the babysitter and they're going to be playing, video games all day long. Okay, that's not acceptable. It's still not acceptable. They can do more video game time, but not all day long. Okay, so we have to understand that. So let's get back then to the old times. Remember when we used to do a lot of crafts and we used to do a lot of activities that were not with technology? Well, if you Google projects, kits, activities, you can find a ton of activities. So if you plan it carefully, you don't even have to buy anything because you probably at home have a lot of things that you can use. Crayons and colors and so forth. Okay, so imagine if you grab a lot of paper and then you color with different crayons or markers, you color the paper, color it, and then you cut it in sizes that are good for origami. So here's you have an activity where you're coloring and you're spending time doing that, and then later that turns into an origami activity. So imagine how much time has already gone by between doing all of that, and of course depending on the age of your child. You can do activities with boxes, you can do activities with old cans, you can do activities with old files, you can do so many activities and be creative. Go online and find a lot of activities to do. Plan it ahead of time. Think about, okay, what is it that I have that I can make faces, that I can make crafts, but I can make anything that would be fun for my kids to do, with you, or some could be independent. It all depends on the activity. For older kids, for teens, sometimes they like doing activities as well. You would be surprised. I have kids that come here that are literally 14, 15, 16-year-olds, and sometimes they see the Play-Doh in my office and they want to play with Play-Doh. Yes, a 15-year-old sometimes is like, hey, can we do Play-Doh? We're talking about issues and we are engaged in it. It doesn't really matter. So you'd be surprised sometimes, or maybe siblings want to do that. But for a lot of the teens, they typically like their technology and so forth. It's very important that you are monitoring what they're doing. Every parent has the responsibility to monitor social media. You have to know what they're up to in social media. I always tell the parents you have to know their passwords and check every now and then. I'm not saying every day, but every couple of months you can check what they're engaging in social media. And if they get upset and they don't want you to, just know that as a parent you have that responsibility, not because you don't trust them, but because you want to protect them from the rest of the world, because we don't know who they're engaging with. It could be people that are of inappropriate ages that are trying to engage with younger kids. So you have to just always be careful. So again, we can let them increase social media or technology use or whatnot, as long as we monitor what they're doing, okay? And we don't let them do it all day. So this is the time to read books, and maybe you can do a book discussion if you read with them. You can play older, games like charades or whatnot. So again, get back to the old times. Just remember when you were a kid and you had to play all of that. Well, that's what we want to do right now. But guess what? In doing that, what's going to happen is that you are going to reconnect with your child if you are not very connected. Or if you're very connected, you're going to connect even more. Because play is so good for them. Play is fantastic for their development, their cognitive development, their cognitive skills, their emotional development, social development. They learn. We can teach them skills, interaction skills, even through play. We can teach them about the coronavirus through play, and teach them how the virus travels from place to place, and we can do that through play. If in my head I'm thinking, okay, with a kid I may use Play-Doh and start creating, how the virus travels and so forth, to explain to the kid. And they may think it's a fun activity, but you're actually communicating and establishing the rules, washing hands and so forth, just through play. So adults can engage with their children through play and get them to open, because sometimes play promotes communication. So they actually open up a lot more through play. So this time that you're going to spend with your child playing, doing activities, is actually going to be so productive for your family in so many ways. And I can rest assure you that if you intentionally engage in activities with your children, you will have a better outcome for your family. So when you see, down the road, a year down the road and so forth, you're going to notice that you are more connected with family members. Also with your spouse, your partner, this is the time to sit down and communicate and, enjoy the time that you have together. Circumstances have created this closeness. So use this time productively. Think about what you can do to talk with your partner about how you want to improve. What do you want to change about your family? Now we are all together here. What can we do differently so our family is happier? How can we promote closeness? How can we do activities that get us to work together? And instead of making this stressful and talk about how horrible it is that we can't, be elsewhere or at work and so forth, think about the positives of being together, of being able to spend time with each other. So yes, it's stressful, and I'm sure a lot of you are worried about finances. We all are, and this is something that we're going to just have to face together. It's not one of us who is just the only one facing it. So it's all of us together, and we just hope for the best. We hope that, from the government all the way to our family unit, we can all work together so we can get through this adversity and come triumphant on the other side, right? And that's really what it's about, because anytime that there's adversity, it's important that we think of this adversity as a time to reflect, as a time to improve, as a time to change something about ourselves. So this is a time to really self-reflect, to really have a lot of, consciously think about what is it that we're doing with our lives. You're going to have a lot of free time, maybe at home where you're not at work. What is it that you're doing with your life, and, how is it that you want to engage with the family and so forth, right? So regarding employment, I also want to mention that if you're staying home with your child, and this is going to be a long time, like we said, it's not going to be 1 day or 2 days like when they're sick. It may be a couple of weeks that your child is home. So maybe you do have to go to work, or maybe you are in a type of employment that you're able to stay with your child. Talk to your employer. Have an honest conversation with your employer and talk to them about the expectations. Of course, you have to comply with whatever it is that you have to do at work, and as much as possible from like telework or doing it at a distance. But also maybe they can give you a little bit of flexibility as far as, working from different times of the day. So maybe you can do some work at night when the children are, almost going to bed or so forth, because employers are being flexible. So it's important that you communicate with your employer as well, so you establish good expectations. Because you also need to understand that, of course, the employer needs to move on whatever it is that they're doing. So it depends on the type of industry that you're in. But it's important that you communicate with them. So there are a lot of things we have covered in this conversation. But, again, it's important that you remain calm and that you really reflect on, and you have to be self-aware as to how you are reacting. Are you reacting emotionally? Are you upset all the time? Are you worried? Are you going into panic because of what's happening? So reflect on that and think that you need to just stop, realize, and give yourself permission to feel that way. because we're human, and humans have the ability to have all of the emotions. So we're human, we can feel that way, but we as adults, we have the ability to change and mitigate and minimize those negative feelings, and try to find good positive feelings that we can replace them with. When we have gratitude about the opportunity to be with our children, to spend time with them, to engage in a different way, to have more time with our partners or spouses or a friend or a family member, then maybe that will change how we're feeling and we will not be overwhelmed, because gratitude does a lot for us internally. We'll feel better when we have gratitude. Also, it's important that we keep our physiological reactions to anxiety to a minimum. So physiologically, you may feel your heart race sometimes, you may be trembling, and you may be like tense because of everything you see is, terrible, or you're worried about what's going to happen. So a good hack is just to breathe. You want to breathe in, hold it, and breathe out. And repeat it for like 10 times rhythmically. And when you do that, you're sending signals to your brain because of the balance of oxygen and carbon dioxide that has gone into imbalance because of anxiety. When you breathe in calmly and systematically, you send signals that it's okay, that we need to get back to calm. Practice, try it, and you'll see how you immediately will feel a little bit better. So try to breathe and try to be grateful for all the good things that you have. Write down your worries. Do activities that take your worries away. If you find yourself having more anxiety than typical, or you really are fearful, worried, do try to contact a mental health provider, because you can, get help through somebody that can talk to you and help you manage those emotions, because it's important that through this time you stay as optimal as possible with your emotional health, and so you can work with your family and you can really use this time to thrive and to come out better on the other side. So those are some of the tips that I have for you today. I hope this is helpful. If it is, share it with your friends, because the goal is that we all together work toward getting through this adversity, and especially with our families, and with the conviction that we can overcome and we can actually gain some strength and be better when we come out on the other side. And lastly, I want to tell you that if you're spiritual, or think about, if you believe in God, thank Him always for everything that you have, and that He's given you the ability to manage all this time and to be with your family and to engage in all these activities with the faith and conviction that you will be okay no matter what, and that there's purpose for everything. So let's be grateful for that, and let's be intentional on really changing the course in the sense that this adversity can bring a lot of good things to your family as well. So I wish you the best. I wish you for you to stay healthy, and hoping that to see you again. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out, comment, share, and I look forward to the next time. Stay safe, stay healthy. Thank you.